There are many different lenses on the market right now, and first and the most important thing you have to ask yourself is, what am I actually gonna film or take photos of? So it could be landscapes, it could be portraits, it could be interviews, or maybe you need everything in one. So first, landscapes. Well, landscapes, they tend to have a wider field of view, and in that case that would be something between 16 and 35 millimeters. There are currently right now ultra wide lenses as well, like 10 millimeters, 7.5 even, but I would recommend you to stick with 16 to 35 because this range is really good for you if you want to take landscape photos, and if you want to go more portraity, then you can basically easy switch to 35 millimeter. That will allow you to take some portrait photography or videos as well. However, if you want to focus just on the portraits, then 16 millimeter would be too wide for you. So you have to go something like 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, or 85. Some people use above 100 millimeters, but I would not recommend you to do so. I do not like the look of the square faces people usually tend to get when using the lenses over 85 millimeters. My favorite lens probably would be Sigma 35 millimeter for portraits. Yes, you'll get a little bit of stretching on the full frame, but if you're using a crop sensor, then 35 millimeters will be just perfect. Also, the higher you go in focal length, so if you go from 35 millimeter and you decide to switch the lens to 85 millimeter, then you'll have more compression in your shot and you'll have more blur of background in your video or photo. So I would highly recommend for portraits, for maybe interviews as well, have 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, or 85, but I would personally recommend you 35 or 50 because they're more versatile and you can use them not only for portraits but for some other stuff as well. Now, interviews are pretty much similar to the portraits because, well, you just filming talking head. The only thing you have to keep in mind though, if you want to have a really blurred background, then you have to go for prime lens like 35 millimeter 1.4 or 50 millimeter 1.8, or if you do not want to have a really washed out background, then you can go for a zoom lens even like 24 to 70 2.8. In that case, at 70 millimeter, even at 2.8, even at f4, you will still get blurred background because the higher you go in the focal length, the more blur you introduce to your image. And it's just up to you to decide. If you want to have more versatile solution, then go for 24 to 70 2.8. And to wrap this up for the interviews lenses, well, I would tell you to go for 35, 50, or 85 millimeter. Another factor to consider is in which lighting conditions you're gonna be shooting. So as I said before, primes tend to have a fast aperture. That means that you have the aperture really wide open, so that allows a lot of light to hit the camera sensor, so you're really good to go and take any kind of shots during the low light conditions. And at the same time, you can use this fast aperture and get this really blurred background when shooting during the bright sun. Just keep in mind that you have to use the filters, and the filters that would be really essential for fast apertures like Sigma or Sony with f1.4, f1.8. In that case, you'll have a lot of light, so you need to control that, and I would recommend you to go with our magnetic ND filters for that case for the maximum quality and without any tint. If you want more versatile solution, then go with variable ND filters. They're really good right now. You can check many different comparisons on YouTube and you will see that these filters, even variable ND filters, they're the best on the market right now. But what if you want to have a really universal lens, the lens that allows you to take landscape photos, that will allow you to shoot interviews, that you can take portraits with? Well, in that case, you have to go for a zoom lens. First, you have to answer yourself these questions. You need a wide lens, middle range, or really telescopic. And if you need a wide field of view for landscapes, but at the same time, you don't want to compromise the quality and versatility, then go with 16 to 35. You cannot go wrong with this lens. 16 to 35, they usually come with different apertures as 2.8, or another version would be f4, and it's a truly universal lens for any purpose except for maybe like macro photography or for telescopic. You cannot shoot wildlife with this lens, obviously, but for anything else, this is a perfect choice. Another lens you cannot go wrong with is 24-70 f2.8. And when people ask me which lens to choose and they do not have any lens at the moment, I would always recommend them 24-70 2.8. For run and gun filming, photography, everything, go with 24-70 2.8. And finally, a telescopic lens like this 70-200 f2.8. This is just for sports, this is for wild photography, for interviews as well, but also it's good for run and gun documentary type of shoots, because you can film details, you can film even landscapes in some instances, because it allows you to compress the background, and it's a really good lens with beautiful image. And there are many different manufacturers producing this lens, so you might go and check with Sigma, Canon, Sony, whatever brand you like. Just you cannot go ever wrong with this 70-200 f2.8. It's a beautiful lens. There is only one drawback with this lens. It's really heavy, so you cannot really travel for a long time while having this in your backpack. Yeah, it's really heavy. And finally, I have to also mention macro lenses. And among all the macro lenses on the market right now, two of my favorite ones would be Canon 100mm macro. It's a beautiful, sharp, really sharp lens, which I shot with Sony camera, so I used the adapter. And another beautiful macro lens will be Sony 90mm macro. Canon tend to be cheaper, so you might go with Canon. Keep in mind though, you need adapter. You're gonna need an adapter if you want to adapt it to Sony system, but if you have Canon, you're just good to go. Get Canon macro 100mm. It's good for macro shots, for product photography, product videos, but it's not only good for these things that I just mentioned, but also for interviews and portraits. Thank you guys so much for watching. Drop your questions down below. Do not forget to check our Instagram as well. Bye.